Senators are voting on a bill designed to combat domestic terrorism 2 days after the Texas school shooting. The Everytown for Gun Safety Group and its grassroots networks gathered with Congress members this morning at the Capitol to demand action on gun safety ahead of the vote. If passed, the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act would create federal offices to track and analyze domestic terror activity. It would also require biannual reporting on domestic terrorism threats and assessments of the threats specifically posed by white supremacists and neo-Nazis. The bill passed the House last week after the racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo. However, it is not expected to advance in the Senate because of GOP opposition. Joining us now is CBS News reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns for more on this. Hi, Caitlin. Great to see you. So can you articulate some of the reasons that Republican senators are opposing this bill, and it probably won't get the 60 votes needed to advance in the Senate?
Hey, Tanya. Well, there are a couple different reasons for this. Republicans think that the administration can act unilaterally, that they don't need federal legislation. They also have been calling it a show vote, and they're concerned about the language in there of what a domestic terrorist would mean and whether that could be manipulated and used for broader terms. So this is unlikely to get enough votes to pass. And the Senate is actually expected to head out to their Memorial Day recess this afternoon and not returning to Congress until June, which raises the question about whether anything, if at all, can get done on gun legislation if they don't come back for another couple of weeks.
And Caitlin, the bill passed the House after the deadly Buffalo shooting. Of course, now we've had the tragedy here in Uvalde. This is not directly tied to these tragedies. I mean, this is something that is looking at domestic terrorism, not necessarily gun control and some of the other more immediate issues. But do you think that these two tragedies, though, will incite more support for the bill?
Well, this bill was brought up after the Buffalo tragedy, and the thinking up here on Capitol Hill was to focus on that instead of gun legislation, because they knew that time and time again, any attempts to pass any sort of gun legislation up here on Capitol Hill was elusive. They knew it was a non-starter in the Senate, so they went this route. However, the conversation has changed a little bit in the light of this tragedy in Texas. While there still remains heavy Republican opposition to a background check bill, to other kinds of minimal restrictions on guns, this is something that lawmakers are at least talking about right now. Whereas last week in the wake of Buffalo, it was very much just focused on domestic terrorism as the avenue to take some kind of action. But just talking to lawmakers up here on Capitol Hill, as I've been doing this morning, the sticking points still remain. Republicans are largely opposed to any sort of federal legislation to address the gun issue. There is a working group, however, working on a red flag law. This is something that we've seen implemented in red states like Indiana and Florida that would require a court order to confiscate firearms from those deemed mentally ill by a medical professional or a court. Lindsey Graham just minutes ago told us that he is working with a group to offer a state grant system for the state. So it wouldn't be federal legislation, but something directed towards the states. We've also been asking about things that have been implemented in Florida in the wake of the Parkland shooting. Remember, in Florida, then Governor Rick Scott, who is a Republican, and a Republican legislature passed a increase in the minimum age to buy a firearm from 18 to 21. That passed, was signed into law. A red flag law was passed and signed into law. So it does raise the question about, there is support that we've seen for some of these kinds of measures, and our own public polling shows that 54% of Americans support stricter gun laws. So it raises the question of why can't something get done in Congress when you see this public support and you see this action that has been taken at the states?
It is a big question. A lot of voters want answers. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much.